It took 7 years to go from honeymoon stage to terror, which was the longest phase, to now finally working my way out. I can't say I'm out. Once you get out, you realize you could fall back down. That's how this works. There's no end goal. You're just on a quest. You're on a journey. It's fun. If there was an end goal, it would be to learn how to enjoy the ride. I get asked a lot of questions. People often say, hey, I'm battling with depression. I've read Johns Hopkins studies. Will shrooms help me beat my depression? I just went through a breakup. I've lost my husband, partner, circle. Will taking a tab of acid, maybe with them, help us rekindle our relationship? I get asked all kinds of strange questions as if I'm some kind of psychedelic guru, just because my YouTube channel is about psychedelics. Primarily, we do cover other drugs, and it has the largest amount of subscribers stamped next to it compared to the other psychedelic channels. Realistically, though, that means diddly squat. All that really means is that I've probably got better marketing tactics than the other psychedelic channels, and that is kind of what sparked my inspiration for this video. You see, I've been on the psychedelic journey for over 7 years now, and I figured it was time that I sat down and I talked to you guys about my relationship with psychedelics. My relationship with psychedelics can be broken down into a few primary stages. This coincidentally coincides with my own honeymoon stage with my romantic partner, Jasmine. Now, my first trip was anything but pleasant. To summarize, my first LSD trip, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just listened to what the dealer said. He's like, yeah, man, that's some double dipped shit. It's going to blow your mind out. And I'm like, all right, sweet. I'd love to get a 360 view of my mind. Let's take her on out and take a look at her. So what ended up happening was I was in a fight with my partner that night, and I entered absolute terror because I learned my very first time why you don't enter a psychedelic headspace when your regular headspace is in the pits, because psychedelics will exaggerate and magnify how you're currently feeling. And I vowed after that moment to never trip again. That is until, of course, she somehow spurred an interest in it, and she's like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'd love to try it. So I was like, whatever. If you want to try it, then sure, I'll jump in those waters one more time with you. Hopefully it's not ice cold this time. We can get some warmth going. And then it wasn't until that second experience that not only the warmth, but the mind expansive qualities of psychedelics began to emerge out of the muck that initially was nothing but absolute terror. I remember she was talking about Buddhist concepts, and she was like, wow, I can see energy. And she was like creating these electrical beams that were kind of jutting between her fingertips, kind of like when you put your hand on one of those plasma balls and you see electricity, only it was coming out of midair. And I started to realize that there was something, dare I say, magical in the psychedelic headspace. And it was from there that we started to explore together. And also our relationship deepened. And I remember in the early days, it really was a honeymoon phase, because I thought that as long as I was with her, she solidified herself as my saving grace at the beginning. As long as she was around and I felt that love, I was confident that we could make it through even the most intense experiences together. So for me, feeling connected to a source of love has been absolutely paramount in these experiences, turning out, well, positive for me. I moved to New Zealand and we had a bunch of really good experiences. Don't get me wrong, a lot of them had challenging points, but especially together, we always worked through it. Now, I left New Zealand. She was still there for a little bit. Future unclear. This marks the moment when psychedelics began to get scary. Again, coincidentally enough, my first trip that was freaky was around the time when I was leaving New Zealand because of the uncertainty. But I was young back then. I'm in my mid-30s now, and back then I wasn't able to see the writing on the wall clear as day that was like, obviously the trips are going south because your mental state is going south. I think I mistakenly believed the psychedelics had kind of turned on me a little bit, and I proceeded to have trip after trip that was just shitty. What happens is it's a snowball effect. You have this one kind of freaky experience, and then the next time you go on trip, you have some reservations, some doubts of, oh no, what if that happens again? And it can kind of be stuck in the back of your mind, like it's been super glued there. And as soon as your thoughts start to tiptoe towards it, they pick up speed. And before you know it, you're right back in that paranoid state, and it snowballs. And the next time you have these fears, because of the anxiety and the buildup around like trying to avoid it, well, of course, you attract what you're thinking about most, whether it's fear-based or positive-based. Not trying to sound like some kind of law of attraction bullshit here, but that's just the way it goes. And it's like now you are more likely to have scary trips. And the snowball just got bigger and bigger and bigger, because the following experiences, right up until, well, even past trying psilocybin mushrooms for the first time, just got scarier and scarier. So this stage of my psychedelic journey, this stage of the relationship could be classified as enter the terror. So we got the honeymoon phase, and now we've got kind of the turnaround phase, the scared phase. I don't know what to call it. This is the fearful stage. And this is where I really started to butt heads. My ego wouldn't let go this notion that it had, that tripping was this beautiful, joyous exploration where you could really dive deep. And keep in mind, in New Zealand, I was listening to Alan Watts, and I was really getting in tune with some Zen Buddhist philosophies, and I was experiencing little Kensho glimpses of Satori, not anything full, but during the trip, I might have got like a little, like a sliver of it kind of entered my eye before I quickly plucked it out because I wasn't ready for that kind of pain. So I went from that to just getting scared. And like I said, it was a snowball, because the more scared I got, the bigger it got. And the more my ego jumped in, my sense of self jumped in saying, no, you can handle this. You can do it. I had this belief that when you have a fear, you face it. But there's more to overcoming a fear than just running towards it head on. You know, I run towards my problems, not away from them. That shouldn't be converted into literal terms. You sometimes need to take a more strategic approach than just being like, this is scary, let's fucking do it because it's scary. And that was my perspective. That's how I treated most of my problems in life, and that's respectable. There's a lot to be said about having the courage to just jump when you're petrified, and I had that courage. But with psychedelics, it doesn't necessarily work that way. You see, the more I jumped, bigger the fall got, and the more gravity pulled me down, the more my velocity picked up, and the more it hurt when I hit the fucking ground, to the point where I just started getting shattered to pieces and pieces. And it all culminated into that experience that I've talked about, which was the worst trip of my life, where I actually entered a state of pure psychosis on mixing alcohol, about a bottle of wine, with 3 tabs of 1p-LSD, which no one should ever do. And I had to be headlocked and held down. Well, my friends didn't really know how to handle it because they were new to tripping. I was supposed to be the fucking guide. So their best idea was, let's get him in a headlock and choke him out when he struggles, and we'll punch him in the chest. So that was traumatic, to say the least. Yeah, that's an experience that you can learn about on my channel if you scroll back a bit in the history. So after that, I was like, all right, I might have to throw in the fucking towel. At this point, I had built a psychedelic YouTube channel. It was now my source of income. I now had a child. 2 if you include the one I had when I was 17. So I had to support my family somehow. And psychedelics were fucking turning on me. Or so I thought. They weren't really turning on me. More so, I hadn't yet learned how to approach psychedelics safely, or even from the point of the greatest personal growth. And here I was talking about them. Like, I felt like I had no right sharing my knowledge. And during this phase, I realized that I probably was never going to trip again. And a lot of the traumatic experiences that had led to that point were making like a solid dent in my psyche. Like, I did not feel stable. I experienced extreme paranoia in the evenings. And now you got to couple this with, I was feeling added pressure to keep the videos going. So I went to the doctor, and I got, I got ADHD. So I got my prescription going for Vyvanse. And as you know, especially as the Vyvanse wears off, it can greatly induce sense of paranoia. Like, I would be so scared in the evenings. And again, my dense skull couldn't fit it together. Like, hey, I'm experiencing some PTSD from the psychedelics that really tore me to shreds. And now I've added in this amphetamine because it was actually kind of self-medicating my depressed feelings, because during the high it would give me, I would feel good. And I kind of thought that it was worth experiencing this just detrimental, absolutely shattering low. So I went through that for some years. And I actually shockingly produced some good content. I could only make videos when I was, in that state. And then I added the kratom into the mix. And then I would have alcohol in the evenings because the alcohol would help mellow me out and numb some of the paranoia, which was pretty severe. Like I've never felt that kind of fear in my life except for during this stage. And this went on for a few years. Where I just started adding more and more compounds to the mix, kind of trying to band-aid this hurt. And I want to point out at this mark that a lot of the shit that I was going through, it wasn't birthed by the psychedelics. I later found through my genuine and true healing exploration that I had a lot of trauma. As Gabor Mate says, the trauma comes from childhood. That was really the root of a lot of this fear. And the psychedelics were really just digging up this junk that I had buried deep down and that I, turned my back on and thought that I could just forget about and make it disappear. But that's not how we work. When we have trauma that happens to us that has been traveling around with us since we were children, we don't just ditch the bags in the lake, never to be seen again, like we're dumping off bodies. Oh no. Those skeletons, they put their hands in our pockets and we drag them around invisible to us, but to some people with very good perception, they can clearly see all those demons that we got on our shoulders. And I wasn't aware of any of this. I was very arrogant to this fact. I blamed my problems on the Band-Aids. So I was blaming the problems on, I was blaming the symptoms, right? Like taking the drugs to cover it up. That was a symptom of a bigger issue. The psychedelics didn't really turn on me. They were just highlighting some real problems with my psyche that needed to be healed if I was going to become a happy person. And now I want to take a moment to define what I personally mean by happy. You see, when I think about me and at my most joyous state, I'm transported back to being a child. And this is why I've got a high affinity for nostalgic experiences, such as playing Pokemon games or anything like sculpting, or I started painting Warhammer, because I'm trying to recapture what I lost. Not all those Pokemon that got deleted as the games got sold and all those hours flushed down the drain. Oh man, my level 99s. But I'm trying to recapture my sense of contentment and completeness that I had as a child. Now, I'm not saying that I had a perfect childhood by any means, but I was extremely imaginative. And as you guys probably can tell, part of the reason why you like my videos is because I'm so fucking weird. Now, where do you think that weirdness came from? I'm wearing these silly little hats. I got little silly quirks. That all came to fruition from just being a very creative and wacky kid. And I was never bored as a kid. I used to say to myself whenever I was thinking about drugs, of course, being a victim of the DARE program, I was taught they were all bad and I believed it. But I used to say, as long as I have my imagination, I don't see why I would ever need any drug. Like, I would get high on my own supply all the fucking time. Just creating out of clay, I would sculpt these creatures, and that was as much fulfillment as I needed. And the ADHD, if you want to call it that, was just how I was. I enjoyed it. I would cycle through different activities every day. I would really just kind of go with how I felt. I might play a video game for an hour, put that down, go sculpt for a while, put that down. And I never saw it as any kind of detriment. And that's just how my brain worked. And I really enjoyed myself. I loved being alone. I loved creating. I couldn't find a greater joy in my life than that. Some big traumas that happened to me was having a child young, and I was very sheltered growing up, and I believed that people who cheat in relationships were like of the utmost evil. They were the most sinister and nasty individuals to ever be birthed into this planet. And I had a rude awakening when I realized that a lot of people are worth their salt and bullshit. They lie, and that really crushed me. And I was already reeling back from having not a good experience growing up with friendships. I always had a difficult time having close friends. I had a lot of friends at one point, but they weren't really people that I was that close to. And I think I just really got unlucky. My mother has a lot of anxiety, and a lot of the trauma stems from, don't want to get into that. This is going to go way off topic, but I go back to my childhood because minus, some traumas, that is when I was the most creative and free. And through growing up, I think a lot of you guys can relate. You lose that genuine innocence, that beautiful spark that we all had at one time, and we still have. It's somewhere in there. You just gotta reach in, and you gotta know where to look to grab it. A lot of us lose that, and mine was drowned out in a mountain of alcohol at a young age. At 15, I started drinking, and I got to the point where I remember thinking I could not live without booze. I genuinely thought that if I didn't have alcohol, there was nothing really worth living for. And I went through addictions to cigarettes, alcohol. I've always had an addiction, and it's not exactly what it was that I was addicted to. It's the point of always having something external outside of myself that I would cling to, that I kind of needed as like my safety net, or so I thought. To get a grip of certainty in my life, I needed some external influence that would implant me with a sense of fulfillment, even if it was just temporary feelings of pleasure, some hedonistic joy there, because it allotted me some certainty in a life that I had drifted far off my path into very uncertain waters, and I wasn't equipped for the uncertainty that I quickly found myself in the storm of, almost drowning in. Let's tie this all back in now. So that is what I mean by happy, and that is kind of when I realized I wasn't happy and these drugs weren't going to fill that void. That's kind of what I started to instinctively search for. And now this whole stage of the journey, like let's go back a bit. We got the honeymoon stage where everything was great, blissful, and that stage was absolutely paramount in order for me to get on this quest. I mean, if we started off in the dark stage, there's not a shot in hell that I would have continued exploring. I would have been like, nah, shit's not for me. Leave it alone. I would have just moved on. And who the fuck knows where I would be right now? I mean, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't have a happy family. Who would have thought? So we went from honeymoon phase to ego shattered. And the more my ego got shattered, the more I tried to trip from a sense of ego, and the more it got shattered. So we went through this whole terror period. And then we ended off with, to try to cover up a lot of my problems, I moved on to different drugs, and I was barely tripping. I mean, I went through like maybe a year or so where I didn't have any trips during this period when I was like, taking these amphetamines. And some of the trips I did have always needed me to kill them with the trip killer, because like I wasn't ready there. And then my relationship was starting to fall apart. Like we probably should have broken up. And then of course, as these stories usually go, we got gifted with another child who was a blessing. Absolutely love that little bugger. I love my family. I love my family more than anything else. Yeah, even more than tripping, psychedelics, more than all this shit. I love my family. And we're going to go full circle. We're going to get there. We're going to get to the healing part. Just let me go on my tangents. We'll be there in a second. All right. For me, happiness, just to summarize, is being in a state where I don't need a drug to feel fulfillment, where I gain fulfillment from my own creative endeavors. I'm a very creative person. And when I lose that sense of connectedness with myself, I can't create anymore. And I just don't feel the same level of fulfillment in my life, if any. I mean, of course, you feel fulfillment in your family and your children, but it's like there's a void. There's something missing that you just can't Band-Aid up with a drug. So now that we got that figured out, I realized that I needed to get back to a legitimately happy stage. I needed to get my emotions healed. And now we enter, after being completely destroyed, the third stage of this relationship, which is called healing. Now, healing often involves a heck of a lot more destruction. It's not like healing looks in the West, where you take a pill and then all of a sudden it miraculously solves your problems. As you guys know who have tried that, I tried that form of healing. It doesn't work so well. The pills, they just bring on more problems that you need more true healing from. What healing really means is facing that deep, dark shit that you've been running from and learning that you are enough. We overcomplicate everything as humans. It's that simple. You got to look at all the shit, all the embarrassment, everything that makes you feel like you're not worthy of love, and you have to look it all in the face. Accept that it happened. Accept that this is just part of your journey, dude, and we all go through this shit. And you have to learn how to love yourself. And learning how to love yourself, especially if there was something that messed up in your childhood where you didn't really get the message clear as day, comes down to realizing that exactly how you are enough. And it sounds so simple, but it's so counterintuitive to how our society is geared. The whole way that our consumerism is targeted is to make you feel like you're not enough until you get this new thing. Oh, you think your life is going splendid? Well, check out this new smartphone that's slightly faster than your current one, has a better camera, things that you'll probably never even actually notice, but you need it. And you're not going to feel like you're good enough until you get this new fucking phone, because now you're going to be up to date and you can show it off, because getting shit makes you feel happy. No, it doesn't. Not at all. Not even a fucking little bit, man. So we're in this society that constantly causes us to seek external validation. We don't know how to validate our own feelings. We have to post pictures. We don't necessarily feel pretty unless we show someone us at our best. And a lot of people who are in this fitness community, the most goddamn toxic of it all, truly believe that they need these six-pack, deeply cut abs in order to be accepted as, being a fit, strong guy. Like, they need that validation, like a crackhead needs his hit from the pipe, and they get it from looking their best and getting people complimenting them and, giving them the attention because of how they look. Like, it's not a way to be. And all of these actions, all of this seeking for external validation does nothing but confirm that you are unable to internally validate yourself, which is essentially, like I said, activating that deep feeling that all of us are born with, where we realize that we are enough, just as we are, problems and all. In fact, that's what makes us beautiful. How boring would it be if everyone was the same? Imagine a life where no one had any problems, no one had any issues, there was nothing to solve. God damn, there'd be nothing to do. Sounds simple when you write it down, but a lot of not feeling like you're enough stems from having very poor value structure, such as having your core emotional needs being, a need for popularity, and then maybe followed by, a need for money, and all of this surface level bullshit that actually doesn't bring fulfillment, because you are never going to be happy in anything you do unless you're feeling that fulfillment. Newsflash, it doesn't matter how much money you get. Doesn't matter how popular you get. None of this shit ultimately means anything if you're not fulfilled. That's why you see very rich and famous people kill themselves. Everything they thought would make them happy doesn't. Makes them happy for a little while, but it wears off like a drug high. And then you got to keep upping the ante. You got to keep doing harder and harder drugs, which is why a lot of famous people do drugs. You got to make more and more money, which is why a lot of people are addicted to just watching the number rise in the bank, even though they don't even spend it. They're just collecting, they're hoarding this fucking huge stash of bananas like Donkey Kong. Then eventually they realize that it doesn't matter what they do, they don't feel fulfilled. And that is because they are constantly seeking external sources for their validation. They do not know how to be enough just as they are. And what you got to do is totally get behind what your core value system is and revamp it. You got to rework that baby, and you got to learn how to value, like you got to learn how to let go of the need for, say, fame or popularity, which all of us have. People will say, oh no, I don't have that need, but that's an ego game. By saying you don't have that need, you're kind of putting yourself up on a pedestal, and you're being like, oh, I'm so much better than all those people who have that need for fame because I've never had that. Don't you see the game? It's a constant game of one-upmanship where the ego is constantly finding a new way to feel better than others. That is the need for importance that I'm talking about. For instance, people in the spiritual community are the most arrogant of all, because what's more egotistical than a fucking ego that truly believes it's lost itself? Now it feels better than all the other egos who are so, they got to suffer with being with themselves. Well, this high and mighty ego has attained a state of enlightenment where it no longer is even an ego. It's transcended the ego. Like, man, that is the biggest fucking trip of all. And so many people in the spiritual community actually think that they're better than others because of the practices they follow. It's hilarious. It's all a game of one-upmanship. And if you try to get out of it, the more you try to get out of it, the more you're trying to actually one-up, because now you're trying to one-up yourself. And you're saying, oh, how I was before wasn't so good, but now that I'm in this way of being is better than before, you're still one-upping. There's no fucking way out of this loop. You got to just observe it, realize you're in this game, and just chuckle a little bit. Because without comedy, there ain't nothing, man. Just learn how to smile. They say roll with the punches. I say just learn how to giggle, let go. Learn how to surrender, which is easier said than done. And that is what the psychedelic journey ultimately led me to. I reached the point where I realized I was very unhealthy. And it wasn't really the psychedelics that were going to fix me from this unhealthy state. They started giving me glimpses of why I needed to be fixed and what I need to do to fix myself. But then it was up to me. And now this phase of my journey would be called maybe the phase of redemption. I mean, there's healing and not redemption. It's all the healing, man. It's all healing. And what ultimately got me on the healing path, dare I say healed. I mean, I'm not healed. No one is ever healed. You're in a constant state of flux. There's no standing still. If you're standing still, you're basically regressing. You're either moving one way or the other, and sometimes you go up and down, and you don't know the downs without the ups. We're in a constant wave, baby. You just got to learn how to surf them. And that's what I started to realize how to do. And it largely came from building a new relationship with me. Take away the drugs, you learn who you really are. And I did this by slowly starting to spend time alone with my thoughts. No distractions, got rid of those. And I implemented a meditation habit. And it's actually only been in this past year when so much has gone wrong for so many people that maybe it was because of that I was finally able to sit in some silence and face my fears. I mean, really face the trauma and get a real grasp on who I am and learning how to appreciate and love who I am, flaws and all. And I mean, this video could go on forever. I could keep going, but I don't want to talk forever. I just want to say that largely was thanks to implementing new disciplines such as a meditation habit. In the beginning, I did guided meditations, and then I started slow. I reintroduced psychedelics very slowly, started with very low doses. I slowly worked them up and up and up into bigger and bigger doses until I got to the point where I was comfortable, and then I chilled there for a while, and I learned how to close my eyes and allow the psychedelic experience to open up its doors and just show me what it has to offer. And I stopped trying to control the trips. I stopped trying to force them into, insightful learning or positive directions. I just learned how to accept whatever it was going to throw at me. And I learned how to ride the waves. I learned how to just go with the flow and stop swimming upstream. And now I could go into detail on how I learned that, but it's really just been, like I said, this journey of reconnecting with what is important to me. And yeah, microdosing, small doses daily really helped with this. I talked about this in my microdose video. Some big doses, like a huge dose of mescaline, helped me kick alcohol for good. I have alcohol in my cupboard. I have no urge to touch it, which is absolutely crazy coming from someone who's been on and off with alcohol their whole life. And I'm finally at a state where the real healing has been happening. And I think the most fascinating part about this is now I can trip, I can explore psychedelics, and I've come full circle. And I wouldn't say I'm back at the honeymoon stage, but I've gotten like a better relationship with myself. I know how to listen to what I need and not arrogantly force myself to say take doses or take trips when I shouldn't need to. And really what it's come down to is just building a really strong, healthy relationship with myself. And I mean, it goes beyond that. I started, I cut out porn for a while. I cut out sugar. I still eat a little bit of sugar now, but that's the only thing. Stop drinking coffee. It's just been this slow cycle of cutting more and more things out to really just get to a point where I feel like my old creative self, where I feel like I've gotten back to that. Because really the goal was to get to a state where I enjoy creating again. because I've come to grips that I'm not going to be happy, or I'm not going to be fulfilled in my journey here unless I have a huge dose of creativity with my breakfast. And that is what I have done. And here we are, full circle. That is what happens. That is my 7 years of tripping. That's where it's got me. It took 7 years to go from honeymoon stage to terror, which was the longest phase. That was like 6 years of it was basically being in the terror phase and just working through problems, to now finally working my way out. I can't say I'm out because, once you get out, you realize you could fall back down. That's how this works. There's no end goal. You're just on a fucking quest. You're on a journey. It's fun. Just go with it, man. If there was an end goal, it would be to learn how to enjoy the ride. So I went from trying, it's funny because during the phase where it was all terrifying, I was trying so hard to control my emotions too. I was using all those drugs because I was trying to implement into my reality my notion of what feeling good and being happy was. And I wasn't going to get it naturally. So I just thought, let's throw some more Band-Aids into the mix. Let's take some more drugs to artificially hype up my state. And it didn't work. It had an opposite effect. But it's funny because you can't look at all of that as all negative, and you can't say that it was even bad, because that was the journey I had to be on to get here. And ultimately, if I'm going to part ways and leave you with any solid message from this long-winded, all over the place video, it's that healing isn't linear, and there's no good or bad. You got to make it through the torturous pain. Sometimes that's what the healing is. It's working through the shit. That's how you learn how to love yourself again. You gotta work through all of the shit. And that is what the psychedelics have ultimately granted me. But it's taken 7 years. So all of you motherfuckers who are like, Adam, I'm thinking about tripping. I want to cure my depression. Will one acid trip do it? If I drop some shrooms, am I going to feel better and be more hyped to be alive? No. I mean, maybe if you're fucking lucky, you could be like me, and it could take 7 years. You could be stubborn. I am a very stubborn person, and that's what the stubbornness has caused. It's taken 7 years for the psychedelics to really actually begin healing me.